when a 12-year-old girl fancies herself to have fallen madly in love with this 23-year-old man who is mature, but he thinks he's a 300-year-old werewolf. Yes, a werewolf. Okay, what happens when their love story, if you can call it that, gets out of control bloody, when they think that they're in some kind of modern day soap opera? Can this even be considered or called a love story? Because in April of 2006, in the small town of Medicine Hat in Canada, 3 members of the Richardson family were unfortunately found murdered in their home, and the prime suspect was an unexpected surprise. It was none other than their sweet, sweet honor roll daughter, Jasmine Richardson. This is one of Canada's honestly most disturbing, and I would dare to even say this is one of the most fantastically perturbed cases I have ever read. Just saying. A suburban teenager, a goth drifter, an internet-fueled romance, and a plot straight out of a horror film. Except this one is also real. Well, hello there. Welcome to Crime Digested, a place where we try to digest senseless crimes, okay? If you are new here, welcome. And if this is not your first time seeing this face, I'm so done. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me on this wild ride. On this channel, once or twice a week, depending, we attempt to delve into some of the most perplexing true crime stories happening around us every single day. Most of these stories are sad, some are unbelievable, and sometimes unexpectedly tragic, but most of the time these stories are a constant reminder of the dark and creepy nature of humanity. As always, today's story doesn't disappoint, unfortunately, so I invite you to join me as we delve into this morbid and bizarre case, a story that will give you goosebumps, okay? And it will make you question if innocence still exists, right? Very quick disclaimer though before we jump in. Everything in this video is alleged and sometimes my own personal opinions, okay? And no one asks for them most of the time, so I just want to let you know that most of the information is what you can also find online, so please do form your own opinion if you want to, and if you have any additional information to add to this video, if you notice something missing or wrong, something misleading, please leave them down in the comment section so that we can all learn from each other, okay? And as always, let's try to be respectful to each other down there in that comment section, if you guys even comment, so that we can foster a safe space for everyone to share what's on their little hearts, right? And share their opinion. With that said though, let's dig in, pun intended. Get it? Because there's werewolves and blood and you know what? Never mind, forget it. So, who is Jasmine? Well, just like any pubescent child, Jasmine Richardson was any normal kid. She was born in 1993, raised in Medicine Hat, Alberta, a prairie town with about 60,000 people. Not too small, not too big. A Tim Horton every corner or every block. Something similar to, I guess you would say, Starbucks and maybe Dunkin' Donuts, whatever your choice of diabetes is. I'm not judging, okay? This town is not really known for too many crimes. And Jasmine, she came from a pretty loving home. Mark Richardson, her 42-year-old dad, was simply described by people who knew him as this clean-cut, former heavy drinker who turned his life around trying to live on the straight and narrow for his family. The mother, Deborah Richardson, she was a 48-year-old mother. She worked as a social worker, very community involved. She loved her community and she was a devout Christian. Then there's her brother. She had a younger brother. His name was Tyler Richardson, who at the age of 8 year old was full of energy, like very much so, and obsessed with SpongeBob. Okay, who can even blame him though? I feel like every kid this age, even some adults, are intrigued by SpongeBob at one point. But Jasmine has always been like a polite child, friendly. She got good grades, but this all changed sometimes around the age of 11. There was a noticeable shift in her behavior, her personality. Anyone who truly knew her, they could tell something wasn't right, something was off. But this wasn't completely unexpected, right? Because, like most kids going through life and puberty and identity crisis, Jasmine started exploring darker aesthetics. She ditched her colorful, bright closet and started to enter this goth phase, which who hasn't? I am almost 99% positive that almost every teenager has gone through that angsty phase where they try to embody this dark aura of no one really gets me. It's just me against the whole world. She was committed to this new aesthetics too because this girl had black eyeliner, corsets, chokers, striped tights, the whole work, the full 9 yard. And guess what? One of her online username was runaway underscore devil. Yeah, and she meant it, okay? Then there's Jeremy. Jeremy Stink, the man child vampire. Jeremy was 23. He lived in a trailer park, was unemployed, and believed that he was a 300-year-old werewolf. No, really. He howled, wore a vial of blood around his neck for his emergency feeding in case he gets hungry. And he claims that he would smell people's emotions. I don't know what that means. He gets diagnosed at some point with depression and borderline personality disorder. He has this long history of being bullied, isolated, and suicidal. Isn't that just a beautiful combination? Just chef's kisses, right? It sounds like a perfect recipe for disaster. Either a school shooter or a future entrepreneur. I don't know. There's never like an in between, okay? Whichever way the wind blows, that's the way that he's gonna be going. And these two misfits, in search of a place to belong, someone to call their own, they meet up on this website called vampirefreaks.com. Very on the nose and very original, if I do say so myself. This site was the hotspot for teenagers in the emo and goth subcultures in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, it was also a hunting ground for very creepy adults. Jasmine lies about her age, saying that she was 15, which was still a minor. But Jeremy didn't really care. Their connection was instant, and their online interactions were filled with poetry. It would have been beautiful any other day, but also death fantasies. At some point, love turned into obsession. In the darkest way imaginable, unfiltered conversations start. In one such conversations or messages, Jasmine writes, I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you. This would go on for some time. But eventually, Jasmine's parents did discover her and Jeremy's illicit relationship, you would call it, and they flipped out. understandably so. They ground her, understandably so, took her computer, banned all contacts, hoping this would deter her and also give her enough space to wake up. But this would backfire majorly. Just like one of my most recent videos on Grand Amato, the man who became extremely obsessed with a camp girl, Jasmine felt like her parents, they were trying to get in the way of her love. She felt like they were star-crossed lovers, okay? And they were fighting against all the odds to prove their love. If you haven't seen this video, you should definitely check it out, okay? It's one of the most WTF stories ever covered on this here page. But instead of causing a distance, however, it made the two even more desperate for each other. They were, like I mentioned, star-crossed lovers, destined for each other and no one else. And everyone else against this relationship, well, those who were against them being together was just an obstacle, a test to strengthen their relationship. They began plotting a way to be together permanently. Come heaven or hell, they were gonna find a way. Jasmine's online blog entries were becoming increasingly unhinged and haunting. One excerpt taken from those entries reads, quote, "My mother just doesn't understand. She thinks I'm too young, but love is love, and they'll see that once they're gone." She literally draws stick figures, cartoon of her family being murdered so she could marry Jeremy, of course. And Jeremy's response to that, you asked? Their throats I want to slit. They will regret the shit they have done, especially when I see to it that they are gone. That's what he wrote in a blog account that was under his name on the Vampire Freaks website. This wasn't a teenage melodrama anymore. There's nothing cute about this at all. They went from self-proclaimed Romeo and Juliet to writing a murder manifesto. April 23, 2006. It was a Sunday morning that began like any other day, but became filled with bloodshed and tragedy. One of Tyler's friends came over to visit him and they had plans to get together for a play date. But upon his arrival, he found the front door locked. Now, this was still a time during which people left their doors literally ajar. They left doors open, especially if they're expecting a visit from someone anytime soon. A time when friends just went to each other's homes with no prior notice, nothing. A locked door was abnormal to his young mind. So he walks around to take a peek inside of the house without much forethought, and ran screaming to the neighbors. What he saw was like a picture taken of a bloody crime scene movie set. It didn't seem real. Mark and Deborah Richardson were found dead downstairs with multiple stab wounds, and Mark had he had been hit with a crowbar, possibly to incapacitate him before finishing the job that they came to do. Upstairs, little Tyler was in his bed covered in blood. He was stabbed 5 times, once through the back. The police were now very concerned for the second child. The family had 2 kids. Jasmine was nowhere to be seen, just gone, poof. An Amber Alert was immediately issued asking the public to call with any tips at all that could lead to her rescue. That is until they found emails, journals, and the morbid drawings. They were not dealing with a kidnapped girl. They were hunting a twisted minded 12-year-old killer and her boyfriend. The next day, police finally find Jeremy and Jasmine in Leader, Saskatchewan. This is about 80 miles away from home where the crime was committed. And they were hiding out, giggling, kissing, if you can even imagine that. Jasmine in a hoodie, all smiles. One witness claimed to have seen them and they were confused. They were acting like newlyweds. When police arrested them, Jeremy, in a very flat and matter of fact tone, says, and I quote, "You caught me. Guess I'm going to jail for love." Yikes. That is spine chilling. The lack of remorse and the hint of pride in his tone is scary. And Jasmine was no better either. She sat calmly through the entire interrogation, no tears, which she wouldn't have really deserved. I'll say that. And no remorse that she should have felt. She spoke about the killing like it was inevitable, something that had to have happened. Quote, "I didn't want my little brother to grow up without his parents. So I decided to kill him too." End quote. Admitting to being the one who stabbed Tyler. And Jeremy, in the meanwhile, painted himself as the tragic hero, the Romeo to her Juliet. He confessed repeatedly. The reason he done it was for love. He and Jasmine had a suicide pact, he explains. "I told her I'd do anything for her, even this. I didn't want to, but I had to." Who forced you? No one reading or listening to this story was able to even wrap their heads around a 12-year-old being this like vindictive and capable of something like this. No child of her age should have been able to even conceive such thoughts. But as much as people might have wanted the punishment to have fit the crime committed under Canadian law, specifically speaking under the Youth Criminal Justice Act or the YCJA, anyone under 14 cannot be charged as an adult, no matter how horrible or serious the crime. And Jasmine, regardless of how twisted she may be for a 12-year-old, she was only 12-year-old when the murder happened. This earned her the title of the youngest person ever convicted of multiple murders in Canadian history. All that for a whopping 10 years in prison, the maximum for a minor. And listen, it's not even strict, okay? It was not a strict imprisonment. If you really think about it, because those 10 years, they included 4 years in a psychiatric institution, 4 years in a halfway house, and the remaining 2 years were under supervision in the community. So in reality, she only really served 4 years if you want to consider the psychiatric hold and imprisonment. I am all for rehabilitation, right? And second chances, I love them. But it's no secret that many people receive heavier punishment for lesser crimes, and a loose 10 years for 3 lives is unbelievable to me. But this is Canada we're talking about, a place known for its reputation of being nice and kind, and I don't know. They see the best in people, I guess, okay? Even to their own detriment. Far be it for me to judge, though, because I know nothing about the law, nothing at all. So everything I say should just be in one ear, out the other. Boop, just like that. Okay, but Jeremy being 23 was not as lucky, thank God. He was convicted of 3 counts of first degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Some experts have diagnosed Jeremy with a mix of borderline personality disorder, a little bit of narcissistic traits, and some delusional thinking. He genuinely believed he and Jasmine were meant to be, no matter the cost. Okay. Jasmine was considered a candidate for rehabilitation, and psychiatrists believe she had been groomed, manipulated, and heavily influenced by Jeremy's twisted worldview, what's sometimes referred to as a folie à deux or a shared madness. Which, yes, I can see and agree with the fact that she was more than likely groomed. She was a child. I am the last person to judge someone's mental health belief. God only knows, okay? But we've all been 12 at one point in time in our lives. And maybe your parents seem like your number one adversaries at times, but I don't think so, or too many teenagers think I'm gonna kill them. I don't think that's, you just throw a little tantrum here and there and you move on to do it all over again after eating and sleeping. The only reason why she was so easily manipulated or turned, by my humble, unsolicited opinion, if we want to give the benefit of a doubt, is because she had a darkness in her to start with. But like I said, zero qualification to judge or diagnose anybody, especially not her. So just my opinion that no one asked for. But here's one Reddit comment on true crime subreddit, and it reads, quote, "She was 12. I don't think she fully understood the permanence of what she had done." Another comment on YouTube under a CBC documentary reads, quote, "She's either completely reformed or the best actress in Canada," end quote. So do with that what you will. I'm not telling you nothing. Jasmine did serve her full sentence and was released in 2016 at the age of 23. The same age Jeremy was, ironically, when he helped her commit these murders. She was still so young. She changed her name, earned a degree, reportedly does some volunteer works. By all accounts, she's a free woman and anonymous. Jeremy, in the meanwhile, he changed his name to Jackson Maine and has applied for parole recently, as early as 2020. He still claims he's in love with Jasmine, but it seems like her love has simmered out with time because she reportedly cut off all contact with him. So now the question remains, what do you think? Do you think Jasmine was a cold-blooded and calculating killer, or just a brainwashed child trapped in the worst possible love story? This case still haunts Medicine Hat, and it probably will for a long time to come. It shook Canada's faith in innocence, honestly, and left people wondering how far can someone, seriously, how far can someone under illusionary spell of love go? What happens when fantasy and obsession or mix with the internet and teenage angst? Apparently nothing good. But I want to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Also, please don't forget to hit the little like, subscribe if you haven't already, so you can find me again. And if there's a case that you're interested in, leave it down below. Maybe we can digest it together, right? But do try to stay smart, stay curious, and protect your peace. If you have a teenager, maybe check their chat history once in a while, you know? And if you're the teenager, well, I guess don't get too invested in the fantasy world, or don't know where I live. Because trust and believe, it never ends well, okay? But with that said, I wish you a fantastically beautiful day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.